Hello and welcome to the 2020 edition of Back to School Night. I'm your host and your student's teacher, Jessica Stokes, and we're exploring global history too in this episode. So since I'm new to BB&N this year, I thought I would start by sharing a little bit about my background. I have most recently been teaching at Thayer Academy. Prior to that, I taught for a while at Ursuline Academy. I have also taught at the Francis W. Parker Charter Essential School in Devens, Massachusetts. That's a school, that's really where I was trained, and it's the school where Jed Lippard, who's the new Chief Learning Officer at BB&N, was a founding teacher. My first year out of undergrad, I taught at the American Community School in Abu Dhabi. And I have also done work for VHS Learning, which is a virtual high school. That's what VHS stands for. I've done curriculum development, course design, and instruction for them. I am a career change educator, so this is my 9th year teaching since I returned to teaching. Most recently, I've worked as an attorney prior to that, and I've also worked as a market research analyst and as a collegiate swim coach. So I tell you all of that because those experiences really do inform my philosophy as an educator. Like many of you may have felt at times, I spent a lot of time while I was working, especially practicing law, thinking, I am not using what I was trained how to do. Like the content of what I studied is not what I'm doing now. However, I attended a school very much like BB&N, and I also spent a lot of time thinking all the skills that I'm using here are skills that I developed through that really rigorous high school education. So I am always looking at my teaching through that lens of trying to set students up to see what skills they are going to use beyond academe. Yes, I want them prepared to perform well in college and in graduate school, but I also want them to have skills that will enable them to feel prepared in the work environment beyond that. So from there, that philosophy translates into some slightly more specific student-centered goals. So what do I want my students to be like when they leave my class? I want them to be able to think critically, to identify salient information, find it, evaluate its reliability, and synthesize that information. I also want them to be able to communicate effectively, and that involves not just writing beautifully or speaking clearly. It means being able to deliver ideas in ways that they can be heard and understood. And because I believe that students and people in general will be the most influential if they're able to do that. I also hope to help students explore their identities and values through education, both as a give and take, that they will learn, view the material we're studying through their identities and values, but also that they might have their identities and values informed or at least put into some sort of perspective through content that we study. And finally, I really hope to develop principled, engaged global citizens. I think that if the world is going to become a better place, it will be because of the students who are in classrooms today, and I want to give them the tools that they will need in order to make their visions for the world happen. So now we come to this course specifically. So the course essential questions for Global History 2 are, what does it mean to be a global citizen? And how do past interactions among global forces shape the present and the future? So these two questions work in different ways. The first one, what does it mean to be a global citizen, allows us to zoom in on a certain time period, a certain place, and think about what does it mean to be an individual person living at that time, right? And then we can compare across time periods or cultures. The other end of the spectrum is the other one. How can we zoom out and look at huge global forces like globalization, like trade, like culture and the spread of culture and the spread of language and climate even? How do these major forces interact to shape the world, both the present that we're living in now and the future? So more specifically, content in this course covers basically 1450 to the present. We started with a really cool unit on globalization in the 21st century and the end of the 20th century. We then are in a unit that is kind of a combination of units 2 and 3 as they're listed here. We're looking at empires, and we'll take an empire and look at their encounters and their early modern globalization and commerce, and then look at another empire, go through like that. Right now we're doing a Atlantic African slave trade unit. We'll then transition into debates between religion and science, which is a little bit more Renaissance Enlightenment. We'll also talk about Atlantic revolutions, especially the Haitian Revolution. Before moving on to Industrial Revolution, we'll talk again about the industrial changes that took place and produced the Industrial Revolution. We will also look at imperialism and colonization and how that changed the world on a global scale. Then we'll look at internal and external troubles that were faced by empires. How did they start to clash with one another, and how did they start to have trouble on an internal basis? And really all of those are setting us up for the big conflicts that defined the 20th century. World War I, World War II, the Cold War, rise and fall of communism, and decolonization. And so through those, we bring ourselves back up to globalization, where we started. As far as getting course information, students have already spent a fair amount of time at each of these sites, but information is available through PowerSchool. PowerSchool always has the assignment sheet for the entire units. You can see all of the assignments in one place. And then students will get their daily assignments and major assessments through Google Classroom. That will be the place where they submit work and where they get work back from me. In any endeavor, communication is really essential to making the relationships work. I know that BB&N's tradition is to encourage parents to speak to a student's advisor before they speak to the teacher, and I fully support that approach. I also urge you, because one of the skills I'm trying to inspire in students is to improve their sense of self-advocacy. I encourage you to urge your student to meet with me first about anything that you might be contacting me about. That being said, I fully recognize that there are times when parents either need or feel the need to reach out to a teacher without going through their student, and I welcome you to do so. Probably the best way to get a hold of me, just from a practical perspective, is through email, and then we can take it from there. But thank you for your time. I'm really excited to work with your student, and I'm looking forward to a great year.